Hello everyone, we're now in Module 2 of the course. This is assignment number 1. So this follows on the heels of the last assignment of Module 1. And I know I mentioned that that assignment was not going to be on the quiz, but it will be on the next quiz. So make sure you go back and look at it. And particularly, you really have to read the paper by Kenneth Morrison, and that was entitled The Cosmos as Intersubjective, Native American other than human persons. And the reason you're going to do that is because Kenneth Morrison really understands what are the tenets to animism, an animistic sort of framework, a religious framework, in which by and large doesn't exist in our hierarchical, corporate sort of world, modern world, although it's beginning to be reinvigorated now. It's coming back. Animistic framework is beginning to return, and we'll talk about that later in the course, why. But it's a way of being in the world that's fundamentally different than ours. And it means that ritual, what we're going to talk about now, is different within an animistic framework than it is in our societies. Our societies are primarily devoid of many very effective rituals because it takes a particular type of architecture, constructed architecture through the myths to make rituals really impactful in our lives. So if you read that paper, you understand what we're going to be looking at next, some case studies that deal with ritual. Now, the readings I have planned for you in this particular assignment are all pretty high impact and important. The first one is not the one at the top of the list, it's the one at the very bottom of the list, and that one's by Stein and Stein. And it's chapter 4 of their book called Ritual. It's a fairly short chapter. Now, they're going to begin by sort of giving you, some a list of what all the different types of rituals are. There are a lot of different types of rituals. Rituals which, reenact ideas, make things very important, revitalize things, rituals for healing, individual as well as group healing. There are all sorts of rituals in which occur, and one of the most important ones are rites of passages. And these are the transformations of individuals within groups to take different roles, which will become publicly recognized and actually understood. Now, we're going to stay with rites of passages for a case study here because it would take too much time to go through every single type of ritual. And additionally, rites of passages were originally brought up in Module 1 through Joseph Campbell's discussion about, what rituals do to transform individuals. And, of course, his concern about the lack of ritual behavior within our society and some of the problems that have occurred because of it. So we'll stay with this. Our first example of that is going to be in the transformation of young Apache girls into womanhood. So we're looking at a film called Inside, an Apache Girl Transformation into Womanhood. And this deals with the group of Native Americans known as the Mescalero Apache, and they live in the White Mountains area of New Mexico. And the short film you're going to see, is something that occurs very regularly. And one thing I want you to notice, and when you're looking at the film, notice how many people are really involved in this rite of passage. Right? How much of the community is involved? And I think you'll really appreciate what ritual really is. It needs to incorporate everyone. Everyone's involved in this, right? Because the rite of passage, when we're talking about transitions of being humans, is a two-way street. In other words, young girls you're going to see here are going to become women, right? And they believe they're women. They have a different state of being. But it's like me saying this: I now declare myself President of the United States. That may exist in my head, but it's not going to exist in yours. It doesn't change your state of consciousness whatsoever. For me to be President of the United States, you must accept me as that. So ritual is always about a public, right? It's the transformation of consciousness in a group, an entire group. So ritual is about an entire group, never about the individuals, all right? Although it's usually about both. Okay. And now this film, the greatest shortcoming of the film, I think, is its time constraint. It's only 15 minutes. So it can't take you into the world of Apache mythology. What is the mythology behind this that allows these girls to make this transformation that's recognized as important? What are the magical contexts? What are the counterintuitive contexts there to open up the world of mystery, right? To suspend the ego that says that woman could never be this. And all of a sudden, the possibilities open up. The heck, yeah, that young girl can be that woman. And to see the future and allow everyone to agree at the same time. That's what we mean by the mystery and magical, the counterintuitive elements. That's what they do for us, right? They take us down to the archetypes. And these mythological plays activate those internal archetypes in everyone who's actually watching. Right? So that mythological structure is going to come up in the paper, just right below that. And it's by Inés Talamantes, and she has researched this for well over 20 years of her life, and specifically within this group. So the paper there is called in the Space Between the Earth and the Sky, Contemporary Mescaler Apache Ceremonialism. That deals with specifically this young girl's transformation into womanhood. And with that, we'll spell exactly why women dress the way they do. The group is doing what it does because it's the reenaction of a myth, and you're going to see how this sort of plays out. All right. Now, what's very important in that essay is getting to the last page. And I mean, just don't read the last page, but you got to get through the essay and read the last page once you're done, because the last page really brings up some important questions about, what are the problems in our society without of rituals of transformation, with rites of passages. What does it mean for women now, for their identity, for their strength or inner character? My kids have always had some sort of self-esteem problem. And I realized, but man, my girls, they need to have these rites of passages. I want to produce really strong women who really know who they are and that are accepted by everybody in society for that sense of being woman, right? Well, you're going to see that's exactly what happens here. Everybody understands what woman is, and you do not mess with woman in that society. That's the one thing. And I want you to think about what she has to say about this in the last page. And I want you to ask yourself this. In a society like ours, which has a vacuum of these important rituals, what sort of rituals could we have? What are the possibilities? What sort of mythological framework could we really reach into? What could we build? And what might be a really good idea for our young women? And it doesn't mean that this excludes young men too. But because the focus of this just happens to be on women, we'll concentrate on that. I want you to think about that, because maybe in a quiz coming up, I might ask you a question about that. Right? What are your ideas? Right. Okay, now the last thing we're gonna think about with these concerns is going back to the Stein and Stein text. Stein and Stein does a very good job of talking to us about the mechanics of ritual. The typology, how it is ritual sort of functions. And the thing about it, what's cool about it is all rituals, no matter what kind of ritual you have, all sort of function in the same typology. One thing sort of describes every single ritual, and that's how they're carried out. So they're going to give you a 3-part sort of typology, and I want you to pay close attention to it. So I have that right here on page 93. I want to point to, so mark that 93. Whatever you do not avoid page 93. On it is going to talk about a 3 sort of step of conditions. One is separation, one is transition, and one is called incorporation. Every single ritual in the world, I don't care which, the rite of passage, revitalizations, health, whatever, are going to have these sort of 3 components. And I'll give you a classic example on something that's not a true ritual, but it's very close, which we can reflect on, your own high school graduation. So we have to think about separation, transition, incorporation. Separation, you need to be separated from the crowd. Something special. You got to be something different. What do? They put you in the front of the floor, in front of the auditorium on the floor, right, in the little chairs. But that's not enough. It's got to be special. So where do they put you in? Little fancy robes, right, flowing robes with a funny little hat, right? And the tassel is on one side. You're separated as the pre-graduate, right? You're there already in front of the transformation. That's separation, right? And with all the tassels and stuff around you, you're entering a mythological world in a certain way. Not one that's highly structured like, the Mescaler Apache, but you're entering a mythological world. Well, the next thing you have to do is go through transition, right? So your transition will be when you start walking up the stairs, up above the platform, above everybody, across it. You're beginning to go through a transition. And what marks the transition is the funny dude up there with the bigger hat with all the colors, and shrouded in mystery, holding the ancient scroll, which is just your fake diploma with a little thingy around it, so ceremoniously iconic, and he hands it to you. Now, this marks the final transition. Now you go through the transition and keep walking across the stage, but now you've got to be reincorporated as a different person. So you sit on the other side of the audience, not in the same seat you were in. You sit with the graduates, and what do you do with your tassel? You ceremonially you put it on the other side. That creates actual incorporation. You're recognized with new rights and responsibilities, which really means your parents will go get a job, right? Or do something with your life. Now, let's think about what drives this whole thing. There's something has to drive. It's the crowd. right? So you are, would graduation be the same without the crowd? You have to have the crowd because they keep you going through the idea transition. It's one thing to be out there on the floor, then get up on the stage and realizing I can't go back to high school. But what if I go up to the dude in the funny hat and he hands me a little sacred skull with my diploma in it and says, "What if you say I don't want it? No, I'm going to go back to high school. I'm going to go the other way." What keeps you from doing that? The crowd. They have expectations for you, right? They're in it, pushing you together. Oh, you can do it. You're going to be this, and you can't stop. And when the crowd comes together with that sense of euphoria and pushing you, is a special term, and it's called communitas. Okay? So rituals need to create communitas, and there needs to be three components to it: separation, transition, and incorporation. And the last thing I want you to look for when you're doing the reading is this word called liminality. So when you're doing the separation thing between, in the separation, you're sitting in the audience, you've got to get up and go through the transition. That's where you're actually betwixt and between. You're beginning, you're sort of between two worlds, right? That's when you have the tendency to maybe, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be that person. I want to go back home. I want to get a job. Dad's got enough money. Mom's got enough money. I'll be all right. I want to be Trump and go the other way. Go back and sit down and not do anything with my life. Really, except, whatever he's done. But so when you think about it, what keeps you pushing yourself through the liminality, again, is going back to the communitas, right? That betwixt and between position, right, is what's happening up here psychologically. And that's when things like the shadow are in there that can become frightened, fear, right? Fear I don't want to be that person. I was comfortable going to school every day. I was comfortable with that. I don't want the adventure anymore, right? What pushes you towards, reincorporation through the idea of transition, right? When you're in that liminal position, it's the communitas behind you, right? The expectations, right? The outcomes of the myth. Right? Of course, the old myth was you must go to high school because you're going to have little pink houses and millions of kids, and that's what you're supposed to do. Well, the outcome of the myth can change for every single society, so that the spoils are not disillusioned, right? So we have to think about, even when we have myths about our own society, what you will become, whether that'll happen or not, we do have myths that propel you through a transition, which are pushed through this idea by communitas, yes? Now, with religions, it's different. It's much more powerful than that because there is a real underlying, magically charged mythological context which opens up the world of deep mystery. So when you reflect back on looking at these young Apache women making this transition, it's not that they just think they're women. They are women. There's no other way in which for them to be at that point because the transition is so powerful. All right. Now, the last thing within this sort of early part of this module is to sort of consider the idea of what magic really is. All right, and this is what links us back to Kenneth Morrison's paper and the last one I was talking about. Because, in our society, when we see, shows and movies that have magic in it, you don't see them in a religious context, like Harry Potter. If it's supposed to be like this Christian, British society, whatever, we're all the Christian crosses. We're all you ever see a priest? Do you ever see anything with any religious context whatsoever? No, it's like magic and religion are completely separate sort of things. And we've kind of artificially, created this sort of distinction. Now, we have to ask ourselves, in an animistic framework, are there these distinctions, right? What is the line between magic and religion, if there is a line whatsoever? And how is it that we've created the difference between the bifurcations between the two? So there's a paper by Jay Laughlin down there I want you to read. It's not very long. It's a short one. It's pretty good. And it's called Songs of Power and Appeasement, the magic/religious distinction between Cherokee songs and prayers. And in that, he really unpacks how we've created false dichotomies between magic and religion, and trying to figure out what are the magical elements of religion and where we can actually find them at, so we can better sort of look at our own religions without filtered glasses on to figure out how much magic actually incorporated within them. The paper also allows us to look at some very early anthropological formulations of what magic and religion were, how we made these distinctions, and how we went completely wrong. And it's a way of actually telling ourselves how we can be reflexive, looking back on ourselves to constantly improve the way in which we do research, and to figure out what we have inside that's preventing us from seeing things in reality. And I think that's one of the better things about this paper. Okay, so that'll do it for this part of the assignment. I don't figure anybody's going to have this thing done till at least next Tuesday. I want you to spend some time doing it. We have a quiz. The next quiz comes up in 11 days from now. So, if you finish this by next Monday night, Tuesday, this thing, you'll be, in pretty good tempo with the material to come. Now, for a lot of you, if this information, if there's too much information coming at you, especially during the time of the COVID right now, and it could happen. I mean, we're all in different contexts. The COVID and all this stuff is affecting everybody in different ways. There's no way that I can benchmark how much information I should put out there for you to read or to look at, to learn by, based on last year or the year before. It's a completely different ballgame. And because I can't live your life, I don't know what's going on. So, if you're really all stressed out about this stuff, you should really write me or pick up a phone call and pick up the phone and talk to me. And collectively, when I hear a lot of information, maybe you're being overloaded, I can easily throttle back on the information. My only goal is for you to learn. But also, there's this huge disconnect. I can't live in your life. The only way I can know is if you come and tell me about it. And I don't treat people calling like whining. I don't look at it that way. I'm like, every young person I talk to, I'm looking at a solid adult just trying to be truthful. The only reason that you guys are in college is to learn. And if there's too much information coming in and you're telling me that, I don't say ha ha. But it's too much, right? And particularly when a lot of people try to contact me, it's that way. So far, I haven't heard anything from this course. I think one person mentioned something, and they had a special circumstance. But if more of you are feeling that way, that there's too much of a workload on you, because the COVID thing and things that are happening right now, please, it would be a disservice to you and everybody else not to sort of give me a message about it. All right? Okay, so let's get to work and we'll see what comes of all this. All right? Bye.